I'd rather not discuss it at the moment. Hi. Oh, yes. This is my world. Ha! And welcome to it. Tell you again, that man has not got a brain in his head.
Well, I like Hamilton Greeley. Cloves, coriander, cream of tartar.
Instead of turning out his usual weekly potpourri of watery fiction, cutesy criticism, and a few rather inspired cartoons, he's decided to devote an entire issue of the magazine to a guy who writes kid books.
It doesn't make sense.
Of course it doesn't make sense.
How can anybody lose a whole jar of dillweed? What guy who writes what kid books?
Oh, what difference does it make? One guy who writes kid books is exactly the same as every other guy who writes kid books.
Maybe there's dill in the garden.
Harold and the Velvet Slippers by George Lindsay Lockhart.
John, did you say George Lindsay Lockhart?
Yes. The Tall Young Oyster Man, Selma in the Land of Shame, and other stories.
There is nobody like him, John. He's written some of the best children's books I've ever read.
Well, he's about to perpetrate still another on an unsuspecting public to be published by the Manhattanite.
That's just wonderful.
And illustrated, if you will, by John Monroe, boy cartoonist.
You? Oh, John, that's the most thrilling thing I've ever heard.
I've done some shameful things in my time, but I have never illustrated a kid book.
It's high time you did. They've needed somebody like you.
Sure, like the Lions needed the Christians.
Now, John, when you go to the office tomorrow...
I'm not going to the office tomorrow.
Why not?
Because your heartthrob, George Lindsay Lockhart, is coming here, that's why.
Here? To this house? The place is a mess.
Now who's thrilled, huh?
The Tall Young Oysterman by George Lindsay Lockhart. It was a funny sunny day. The tall young oysterman had a hearty breakfast of fish chowder and hot cocoa and thought, what a wonderful way to start a funny sunny day.
Girls are pretty at best, and only women are beautiful. And I seldom look at any female under 30. In your case, dear Mrs. Monroe, or may I call you Ellen?
Oh, yes, indeedy.
In your case, dear Ellen, I find myself making an exception.
Under 30? Oh, Mr. Lockhart, I've been reading your books longer than that, and loving every one of them.
Thank you.
Actually, I only have to wear these braces till I'm 11 and a half.
My word, that's interesting. Have you always lived in the country, my dear?
No, not always, although I do prefer it.
That's immediately apparent. You seem in excellent shape.
Oh.
About the book, Mr. Lockhart, what is the title?
That which we call a rose, as my friend Shakespeare once said. By any other name?
No, I meant,
John, we haven't even had dinner. I'm sure Mr. Lockhart would rather freshen up. Work can wait till tomorrow.
Well, it may be that Mr. Lockhart is inspired.
Virtually 100% of my waking hours, sir. Yet inspiration pales in the presence of such thoughtfulness and beauty. I am your servant, madam.
Well, your room is just at the head of the stairs, if you'll follow me.
Whither thou goest?
I'll carry your bag upstairs for you.
In 12 years of marriage, Ellen has never cared how freshened up I was for dinner, nor has Lydia ever carried anything up to my room, which just goes to prove my point about women. They are putty in the hands of men who write kids' books. I've always wanted to write a book myself someday.
That's no disgrace. When I had more hair and less wisdom, I wanted to play the trumpet. Get out of there, you dirty bird!
Well, I expect all that's left to decide is who paces where.
Well, where do you do most of your pacing?
Actually, I mostly just sit and fidget. Well, shall we get started?
Dear old Gilbert Converse. He was a sitting pacer. At the age of 38, they found him there dead.
Really? Well, you know a funny thing? I don't believe I know the story of the book that we're planning to do.
She was dead. Dear, gentle, patient, noble Nell was dead. Her little bird, a poor, slight thing the pressure of a finger would have crushed, was stirring nimbly in its cage, and the strong heart of its child mistress was mute and motionless forever.
Is that the book we're doing?
That is the book we're not doing. That is the old curiosity shop, The Death of Little Nell.
Oh. Well, things being what they are, why don't we get started on what we are going to do, hmm?
Immediately. And still her former self lay there unaltered in its chain.
They've been working a long time.
Maybe you better call them down to lunch.
No, dear. One doesn't disturb the creative flow.
Little Willie, from his mirror, licked the mercury right off, thinking in his childish error it would cure the whooping cough. At the funeral, his mother smartly said to Mrs. Brown, "'Twas a chilly day for Willie when the mercury went down." How does that inspire?
Seems a little grim for a child's story somehow.
That's what it is.
What?
In the white heat of creative effort, we have completely neglected the inner man. We need something to restore the tissues, keep us going.
Well, what would you like?
It isn't a question so much of what one likes as what gets the job done. Do you have anything with a little age on it?
I think I know exactly what you mean.
Liquor store. Beautiful morning, isn't it?
A whole case of bourbon. We only order a couple of bottles every other Saturday. This is Tuesday.
This was an emergency call, ma'am.
The gracious gesture of a gentler day, the supernaculum, meaning literally upon the nail.
What's it for?
It's a token that one has, without flagging or flinching, drained one's bumper. Did you ever see Pat Witherspoon?
I seem to remember a tap dancer. Look, George, I don't mean to be pushy, but we have got a lot of work to do.
The tap dancer was little Pat Witherspoon. His son, who was more the ballroom type, was big Pat Witherspoon. I was referring to the grandfather, Pat Witherspoon Jr., the darling of the music halls. His feet gave out when he was 87.
With magazines, there's a deadline.
Well, that's the nature of deadlines. Pat Witherspoon Jr. started out in soft shoe, and gradually he added the sand and the vocal, what he called his hoof and mouth routine. LC from Chelsea. I can think of nobody else but LC from Chelsea. Nobody else for me. LC from Chelsea. I can think of nobody else but Elsie from Chelsea. Elsie is the only one for me.
Some places quarantine animals 6 months in England.
Oh, I can't get emotional about animals as long as they can be eaten or worn or taught to pull a wagon. Gad, here we're out here in the desert without rations or supplies.
I do believe I heard a supply train pull up a few moments ago.
Oh.
You know perfectly well that young ladies are not allowed up here.
You know something? I think I like Mr. Lockhart. He's very sincere.
Hello?
Hello, Ellen. Hamilton Greeley.
How are you, Hamilton?
I'm fine. What are those artists been doing out there all week?
John and George, they're working like beavers.
That's marvelous. But I don't need a dam. I need pages, words, pictures.
Is something wrong?
Temporarily, I got 44 pages ready for the press on the life and works of George Lindsay What's-His-Name. The world is not yet ready for a magazine with the other 52 pages blank.
Is there something I can do?
Oh, let's see what would happen if you would call one of them to the phone.
Oh, I see. Of course, Hamilton.
Wives and children are the culprits. They're the ones who cause mankind to slip off to some office every day.
Jobs are very contrived. I wish I could kick the habit.
The family unit and the home are a comparatively recent female invention. Man was never intended to live that way.
Very often, though, wives are a fine thing to have around.
So is horseradish. There's a very wise and ancient proverb that says, if wives were a good thing, God would have had one.
Oh, come on, you made that up. Come to think of it, though, if we didn't have wives, we wouldn't have children.
You bet your sweet life you wouldn't. I used to think that children were nature's practical joke upon the human race. Pointless, tedious, and in questionable taste, but still a joke.
Aren't they?
No, a mistake, not a joke. Nature, my boy, has no sense of humor. Nature goofed.
That's funny.
In 5,000 years of comparative civilization, no one has ever discovered a practical use for the human young. In many of the higher forms of animal life, the adult male devours the young. The guppy, the alligator, the lowly hamster.
With Siamese fish, it's the mother who...
Lydia!
I'd better go for my walk. Now, ventilate the system. Recharge the batteries. You're looking lovely, my dear.
But why? I'm 59 years old. I'm an important man, a busy man. I'm the publisher and the editor of this magazine. These people work for me.
I've never heard anything like that before in my whole life. Do you know what he is, John? He's an evil old man.
Well, he may have some evil old puns.
In my own home, in our home, with our own daughter sitting there right in front of her own father, drinking it all in while he's been doing a little drinking of his own.
Now, beer is a very wholesome beverage. It might interest you to know, as a mother, that in France during the Second World War, when they could no longer get milk for babies...
Oh, now stop that. A neat work table, nothing on it. May I? What's this?
That's a chilly day for Willie.
How sweet.
Those are just doodlings. Oh, that is a tap dancer. Goes by the name of Pat Witherspoon.
John, what are you doing a book about?
We haven't decided yet.
Are you telling me, John Monroe, that for almost 2 weeks now, the two of you have just been larking around? Just playing in the attic? Wasting your time and my husband's time and Hamilton Greeley waiting to go to press?
My dear, you're even lovelier when you're angry.
And this household does not need an influence like you around if all you do is recite silly poetry and make poisonous speeches about dogs and children and women.
Ellen, where is our sense of humor?
As for you, young lady, and your Siamese fish, what have you got to say for yourself?
Mom, why is the phone off the hook?
Oh, no. Hello? Oh.
The boy stood on the burning deck, whence all but he had fled. The flame that lit the battle's wreck shone round him o'er the dead. Yet beautiful and bright he stood, as born to rule the storm.
Boy, you sure did it that time.
It's all your fault, you creepy little juvenile.
Oh, I don't even know what you're all hollering about.
If there weren't any kids, there wouldn't be any kids' books. And if there weren't any kids' books, I wouldn't have to write the blasted things.
Well, it's not my fault. I don't even like your books.
Really? You're not just saying that?
Honest. They're all right, I'm sure, but they're not my type.
Well, somebody's been buying them.
It's the mothers.
Yeah, the mothers. I suppose you're right.
If you really don't like writing kids' books, maybe there's something else you could write.
I could write anything I wanted to write, sister. Science fiction, plays, musicals.
Why don't you?
Why don't you? Why don't you? You don't understand these things, you rotten little squab. All you have to do is get up in the morning, put the stupid braces on your stupid little teeth, and check out who's giving the birthday party today.
Well, grown-ups don't even have to do that.
Well, I'm not a grown-up. I'm a writer.
Are you afraid?
Afraid? Of course I'm afraid. Wouldn't you be if you were successful?
I don't know.
Of course you don't. You're still a failure. You don't know what it's like to be accepted. You don't realize that success can become a habit.
But you can break habits if you really want to.
Don't be so smug, you little beast. It's not that easy. You are irresistibly drawn back to your bad habits like a murderer to the scene of his crime. Unless circumstance prevents it. Wait. Anthony Trollope, 1815, 1882.
What did he do?
He wrote 60-odd books, but he didn't like writing. He liked traveling and playing cards and going fox hunting 2 or 3 times a week.
Well, then how did he write 60 books?
He got up at 5:30 in the morning. 1,000 words every hour.
Did people buy all those books?
As fast as a poor man could turn them out. Until they read his autobiography. Then they let him alone.
What happened?
He had destroyed his image. He wasn't the way all those readers wanted him to be. He couldn't give his stuff away. That sort of thing could happen to anybody. Yeah. It could happen to anybody. Are you sure you know how to work that thing?
You just said it and it works itself.
Now, why are we all gathered in here?
Well, you're about to witness the professional suicide of George Lindsay Lockhart. I'm about to do my thing, while I still have a thing left to do. Now, here's one for openers. And let's call it the Shrike and the Chipmunk. Once upon a time, there were 2 chipmunks, a female and a male. The male chipmunk thought that arranging nuts in artistic pattern was more fun than just piling them up to see how many you could pile up. The female was for piling up as many as you could. She told the husband that if he gave up making the designs with the nuts, there would be room in their large cave for a great many more. He would soon become the wealthiest chipmunk in the woods, but he would not let her interfere with his designs. So she flew into a rage and left him.
The Shrike will get you because you are helpless and you cannot look after yourself.
The female had not been gone 3 nights when the male had to dress for a banquet. But he couldn't find his studs or his shirt or his suspenders. So he couldn't go to the banquet. But that was just as well, because all the chipmunks who did go to the banquet were attacked and killed by the weasel.
I like it. It's very homey.
Yeah.
Hamilton.
Ellen, it was such a nice day, I thought I'd drive the 30 miles up here and hang your phone up for you.
You'll have to come back later, Hamilton. We're all in conference.
Ellen, do not be humorous with a man in my condition.
They're finishing the book.
The next day, the Shrike began hanging around outside the chipmunk's cave, waiting to catch him. The Shrike couldn't get in because the doorway was clogged up with dirty laundry and dirty dishes.
He would come out for a walk after breakfast, and I will get him then.
Thought the Shrike.
What's a shrike?
But the chipmunk slept all day and did not get up and have breakfast until after dark. Then he came out for a breath of air before beginning work on a new design. The Shrike swooped down to snatch up the chipmunk, but he could not see very well on account of the dark. He butted his head against an alder branch and was killed. A few days later, the female chipmunk returned and saw the awful mess the house was in. She went to the bed and shook her husband.
What would you do without me?
Just go on living, I guess.
You wouldn't last 5 days.
She swept the house and did the dishes and sent out the laundry. And then she made the chipmunk get up and wash and dress.
You can't be healthy if you lie in bed all day. You never get any exercise.
So, she took them for a walk in the bright sunlight, and they were both caught and killed by the Shrike's brother, a Shrike named Stoop.
But a fable has to have a moral.
The moral: early to rise and early to bed makes a male healthy and wealthy and dead. That ought to fix the little nippers.
I don't get it. That's no kid's book.
I've got another. The stork who hated babies.
I don't understand what they're doing. Now, if he writes stuff like that, no decent thinking parent will ever buy his books again for their kids. He's a nut.
Hamilton, don't be disrespectful of the dead.
All right, here we go. The stork who hated babies. A Danish stork was in the habit of spending 6 nights a week with the boys, drinking and dicing and playing the match game.
Ribald Fables for Jaded Brownies by George Lindsay Lockhart, illustrated by John Monroe. I am so proud. George must be very happy about the way this whole thing turned out. What does he say in his letter?
Well, he's doing the book for a new Broadway musical.
Oh, what is it?
Mother Goose.
Really?
In the nude.
Oh, you're making that up.
No, it's called When She Got There, Her Cupboard Was Bare.
Well, personally, I think that's going a bit too far.
I suppose she's entitled to her opinion.